All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we have Glenn Greenwald and Danny Jones. Before we get started, I just want to say one quick thank you to everybody who subscribed. We just hit 1,000 subscribers. I really appreciate the support. But without further ado, let's get right into it.
But so transitioning a little bit to the topic of Epstein and Trump and Israel, we mentioned that Israel, or not Israel, but the Epstein thing has been one of the most bipartisan stories of my lifetime because it affects both sides of the political spectrum. But everything that's going on right now with the Israel lobby becoming more and more in the public light, and how our politicians are being paid off by Israel. And now you have the people in the government saying that we attacked Iran because Israel did it first. And it seems like if you are a foreign country that is subverting another country, you want to at least be a little bit discreet about it, right? You don't want to be so overt. And it feels to me like they're intentionally being overt about this and intentionally trying to stir up more controversy over the Israeli influence in the U.S.
Yeah, but I don't think they're doing it out of miscalculation, but rather panic and necessity. It's hard to overstate for people who only started paying attention to Israel in a really intense and passionate way since, say, October 7th, how different of a world we live in when it comes to the ability to talk about this than basically every era before this. You have generations, basically since the creation of Israel. You can go back and listen to Harry Truman when the United States was the first country to recognize Israel, when Zionism was still very controversial as a new ideology. It didn't even exist until the early 20th century, basically. We talk about it now like Zionism is a religion. Nobody can question it. But Zionism is a very new religion. There are a lot of religious Jews who think it's heresy, but they're outnumbered. I've interviewed them on my show. But if you probably the worst accusation that you could stand accused of being guilty of in public life was anti-Semitism. People were petrified of it. I mean, you could withstand being called a racist more easily or any other, but anti-Semitism, being an anti-Semite, that was career destruction. And it's not hard to understand why. There are a lot of, very powerful Jewish people. This is just reality. I know people want you not to say it, but in banking, in Hollywood, in media, in politics, in education, in universities. And so there was a lot of power that was packed into that accusation. And I remember one of the first times I ever really confronted this as someone who was, writing about politics and doing journalism, it was 2006. Hillary Clinton was running for the Senate in New York. And this was before the Hillary Clinton that we now know, the super mega establishment Hillary Clinton, who was Secretary of State, who advocated wars. This is the Hillary Clinton who people still thought was kind of the left-wing Hillary Clinton as she was depicted in the 90s when her husband was president, going back to her Vietnam years when she was a protester, feminist. And when she was running for the Senate in New York, she started taking these very hardline positions, including about Iran. This is in the midst of the Iraq War. She voted for the Iraq War. She was very hawkish on Iran. And she had this finance guy for her campaign named Hank Scheinkauf. And they had this neoconservative Jewish newspaper called the New York Sun. I think it's now defunct, but at the time it was a big neocon journal. And they asked him hey, what gives? Why is Hillary Clinton so hawkish now? She seems like she's almost in the center, even on the right. And he said, look, the reality is in New York politics is that Jewish donors are the ATM of New York politics. And you cannot succeed in New York politics unless you become fanatically pro-Israel. And I wrote about this. This is a Jewish finance director of Hillary Clinton saying this. I'm Jewish. I was writing about it because he actually said it. And I remember it was the first time I really got attacked, in a serious orchestrated way. Yeah, 2006.
Wow.
It was you're an anti-Semite. This is a trope that Jews control everything, that they have all the money they use. I was no, but I'm not the one saying it. I'm just reporting. This is the reality of what this guy is saying to a neocon Jewish newspaper, the New York Sun. And then it was that year that John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt, the professors at Harvard and the University of Chicago, wrote an essay that they couldn't get published in the United States. So they published it in the London Review of Books called The Israel Lobby, and then they turned it into a book in 2007, which was the first real mainstream scholarly attempt to drag the Israel lobby out into the light, because as you said, they had been hiding in the kind of, operating in the shadows the way most lobbies prefer to, not just them, but most lobbies. And I was shocked by just how these like very well-respected, faculty members at our leading institutions, among the best, most regarded international relations scholars in the world, just instantly overnight got turned into Jew-hating bigots, anti-Semites. And that was when I realized, wow, this is something you can't talk about. And just my personality is, okay, well, then I'm going to talk about it as much as possible. So all I can tell you is this is how they operated for so long. They were in the shadows and they were incredibly effective. I would be screaming about this like we would hear the Republican and Democrats can't agree on anything. And then you would get some AIPAC resolution that they would put before Congress, when Israel was bombing Gaza in 2014, for example. Not as much as they did in 2023, but it was a serious bombing campaign. And they had some resolution AIPAC wanted put before the Senate and the House, and it passed like the Senate 90-2, saying we are on Israel's side, we side with Israel, we stand with Israel, and the House was like 431-6. Wow. And it's like you don't see bipartisan consensus on any issue other than this very controversial country and so the power is so obvious, but it operated in the shadows.
Yes.
What happened was the combination of what they did in Gaza and just the absolute like moral atrocity of it, and the fact that we now have independent media. So, if this had happened 10 years ago, no one would have seen it. Now you have, people in Gaza with their own phones uploading every day.
Right.
And you have, people who aren't afraid to show this. And you have all these people consuming it on TikTok and everywhere else. And the polls just started immediately collapsing in the United States. And you had major figures like Tucker, who never talked about Israel before October 7th. I was on his show 1,000 times before October 7th on his Fox show. Never once went there to talk about Israel, never asked me to talk about that. But a lot of people were like, I can't avoid what I'm seeing. This is, and it wasn't just what Israel was doing. It was the fact that the United States was paying for it, financing it all, arming it, diplomatically and militarily protecting it. We were completely a party to the war.
Just really quickly, did you guys catch that? He said that whenever a bill gets introduced that's backed by AIPAC, it gets approved almost unanimously. On top of that, whenever a package gets introduced, like a funding package for Israel, that also gets approved with bipartisan support. But whenever it comes to policies that are introduced that would benefit the American people, it always seems to be a dogfight, right? It always seems to be a back and forth. It's a very partisan situation that requires a lot of arguing and bickering. But it doesn't seem to be the case when it comes to AIPAC. It's really interesting.
And young people first, and then lots of other people started finally seeing the truth. And that's what finally dragged the Israel lobby out into the open, was that they couldn't afford any longer to kind of have this subtle operation. They had to really like go after people you see what they're trying to do to Tucker. I think the most understated story of the last year is the fact that you had this app, TikTok, which was used voluntarily by a third of the American population, talking about tens of millions of people, and was easily the most popular for American young people. And it was really one of the apps, the only social media platforms that the government couldn't completely control the way they did with Google and Facebook, Meta, and the rest, because they're so dependent on the American government. They were allowing a lot more free speech on the things the American government cares about, like Israel, which is why there was, and a lot of people have this misperception that they decided to ban TikTok because of China. It was in 2020 when Trump said, let's ban TikTok because of China. It went nowhere. No one took it seriously. It didn't get anywhere near the votes. It lingered for years. It was only after October 7th, and the ADL in January 2024 says, we have a big TikTok problem. We need to ban TikTok. And then suddenly the Democrats get on board with it. The Biden administration gets behind it. They banned a social media app in the United States, the thing we accuse China of doing, or Iran or Russia or whatever. And then they force its sale to Larry Ellison, the single largest donor in history, private donor to the IDF, to the Friends of the IDF. He puts an IDF soldier in charge of content moderation. It's all done right out in the open. And it's, and then he buys CBS News and puts Barry Weiss in charge. Like the panic is so visible now. And that's why, they never wanted that. They never wanted it to be so obvious that you and I are able to talk about this and everyone just nods their head and understands what we're saying. If you said this 5 years ago, even if you had me on my show and we talked about this, and you talked about the Epstein class and the Rothschilds and AIPAC, you would be destroyed.
Totally.
But now the cat is out of the bag and it's never going back in.
Not only would you be destroyed, but on social media apps like YouTube, your content
banned.
would be completely invisible to people.
Yeah, or banned or suppressed or whatever.
Some level of suppression that they were doing like all the time when Biden was president. And then another thing is you also, not only is it just out in the light because of all the public attention on it, but you have, those moments like when Netanyahu was talking to those people, those reporters or whatever it was, or I forget who he was exactly.
Like social media influencers?
Yeah, and there was someone had a camera right in his face, and he's like, well, now what do we have to control next, class? Like talking like some mobster. Like, what's the answer? And he's like, TikTok. Like, there's a camera right there. This is going to go out on social media. And what the response, like he's not, Netanyahu's a lot of things. He's not dumb.
No, not at all.
So what is the thought process behind this?
They understand that, like, okay, Israel since its inception, since its creation in 1947, has basically been a dependent state of the United States. They've been completely reliant on the United States, and it's gotten increasingly reliant. We pay more and more for them. We give more and more to them. We go more and more at war for them more and more readily, more and more easily. And I don't mean things like, we went to the Iraq war for them. Leave that aside. I mean things like anytime they're in any kind of conflict, we deploy our military to that region explicitly to defend and protect Israel, put our service members in harm's way to defend them. It's a tiny little country. Why are they so powerful? Because they've been feeding off of the United States like some kind of leech. They stole our nuclear secrets. They've had spies at the highest levels of our government. And this is something that has been so central. And it's not central to their survival. It's central to their ability to dominate the region, to steal land, to expand, to have more Lebensraum, as the Germans, used to say. And so the ability to maintain this stranglehold on a bipartisan level on the American consciousness, American public opinion, especially in Washington, has been absolutely central to the Israelis for, as long as Israel has existed. And to watch it now all kind of unravel. And I do think the main reason is independent media. Like, you can try and censor now all you want, but there's enough places you can go and that offer free speech. There's people who are just too big to censor, like Rogan, and Tucker, and a lot of other people who have been just, very willing to finally talk about this issue. And, David Ellison and his daddy, Larry Ellison, they can buy up like CBS, and now they're trying to buy, Warner Brothers and CNN and everything else. They can buy all that they want. This is never going to reverse. Yeah, exactly. Or, Paramount and CBS News, like, it's not nothing, but it's kind of like trying to build a little brick wall to stop a tsunaami.
Yeah. I get frightened about what's going to happen with things like Google and YouTube. Because like the previous to this, to the new Trump administration, which give them credit that like it seems like the clamps have been lifted off of social media. And I think a lot of that has to do with Elon probably buying X and opening that up and fumigating X or Twitter. But it does seem like the limiters have been taken off of YouTube and Google. I know there's a lot of people who have like pointed out a lot of the way like the Google search algorithms have been curated, and to like when Trump was running against Hillary, you couldn't, or against Kamala in the recent election, like you couldn't search one good thing about Trump or one bad thing about Kamala. And I don't know how much that's been curtailed with Google, but I know for a fact, I've seen it on YouTube. Like you can pretty much the limiter is off on YouTube. You can talk about whatever you want, and they will pump you in the algorithm, especially this Epstein stuff, and especially like any kind of criticisms against the current regime, which is I'm optimistic about, and I'm frightened about what's going to happen when the pendulum turns, when whoever becomes the next president gets in power. Like
yeah, I think what happened where the Biden administration got so brazen and aggressive about doing things that as Americans we just know aren't supposed to be done by our government, especially when it came to COVID. But there was, censorship around the 2020 election. There was censorship around Ukraine. It was primarily people really understood with COVID that if you questioned the Fauci consensus or the World Health Organization consensus on the origin of COVID, whether it was really this zoonotic
Right.
virus that leapt from animals to humans, and this bat, these bat markets, these wet markets of the Chinese, and it was called racist to say that it came out of a lab, even though to me it was always way more racist to be like, hey, look at the Chinese, they're so filthy and disgusting that they produce all these like global pandemics from their disgusting wet markets because of their primitive eating habits. Like, oh no, it leaked from a very sophisticated lab that the United States funds. That seemed way less racist. But ultimately, the only question was like, which was true. But we were banned from debating that. We were banned from discussing. There was an edict in the Lancet very early on saying anyone who's questioning this consensus, is racist, is spreading disinformation, and then the big tech companies censored you or questioning the efficacy of masks or the dangers of the vaccine. None of this was allowed to be debated. The most important epidemic, pandemic, epidemic, whatever you want to call it, in a century. And as Americans, we are banned by American companies from questioning government claims because the White House is calling and demanding that this be removed. And then on top of that, Donald Trump, as the sitting president of the United States, get banned from every social media outlet. Like, people have forgotten just how insane that was. And I think there was enough of a realization, like, even though the Supreme Court kind of threw the case out, even though they lost in the lower courts, the government did, the Supreme Court threw it out on kind of a technicality. It didn't matter. Like, the American public understands we don't want that. We don't want the government controlling big tech.
What case specifically are you talking about?
There was a litigation that was brought by Arkansas and Louisiana, Louisiana and Missouri, the attorneys general of those two states, sued the Biden administration, claiming it was a violation of the First Amendment to be badgering and cajoling and threatening big tech to ban certain opinions, to ban certain users on COVID and on other things. They got a lot of, discovery showing that it was the FBI and the White House doing it, the CDC. And in the lower court judge said this was the worst full frontal assault on the First Amendment he'd ever seen. Went up to the appeals court, judge appeals court, affirmed that lower court ruling and said this is an obvious violation of the First Amendment, needs to stop. And then when it got to the Supreme Court, they basically threw it out mostly on grounds that you couldn't prove, like technical grounds, like who has standing to sue this, who has really been censored, who has been silenced. They didn't really address the heart of the matter. And they kind of said, it's okay for the White House to tell big tech, like, hey, we just want you to know we think this is misinformation, kind of casting it as free speech on the part of the White House. But so ultimately the case lost on the merits, but it didn't matter. By then, the political controversy was so large over what is just very extreme government censorship of the medium we use to communicate. But at the same time, also the emergence of independent media made it so that it almost was less important. Like YouTube and Meta realized that Google and Meta, if they got a reputation for censoring, people are just going to go to places like Rumble or X or other places where they wouldn't be censored.
All right, guys, we're going to stop it there. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you agree with him or not? I think he makes a lot of good points, and he brought up some stuff that I wasn't aware of. I think the fact that, the Israeli government and AIPAC and all these other wealthy elite individuals who are sympathetic to the Israeli government are going out of their way to influence our politics is disgusting, right? On top of that, if you look at the past, right, you look at like pre-social media era, right, pre-9/11, whenever the mainstream media was still in charge, whatever they put out was the truth. And so this strategy of influencing mainstream media might have worked back then, but now that you have a lot of independent media, it's hard to censor those people, right? And Americans, we don't like to play that game. We like our free speech. We actually respect and revere the First Amendment. And we're okay with discourse, but we need it to be free speech, right? And if you want to censor it because of your narrative, we're going to push back against that, and we're not going to stand for that kind of behavior. So I'm glad that all this stuff is coming to light. I'm glad that people like him are out there talking about it. I'm glad that I'm able to come on YouTube and make videos and expose a lot of the stuff as well. And I'm also glad that American people are waking up and looking and listening and learning about what's been going on for so long in our government. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. And again, thank you guys for the support. We hit 1,000 subscribers. It's a big milestone. I appreciate you guys supporting the channel, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Have a good one.